those slogans that we hear, like trust the process or like keep coming back one day at a time, right? They're cliches because they're true. And for me, like, I didn't know how anything was going to turn out. Like, I never would have predicted that I would be like sitting here having this conversation with you, having written a memoir that just came out, living in California, married. Like, I just wanted to not drink and wake up hating myself. Like, that's it. I thought my life would stay exactly the same. I kind of surrendered slowly to this belief that there was just more to be revealed. I think like wisdom takes time, right? What you said, that cultivating wisdom takes time. It's true. Recovery takes time.
Stories are powerful.
Welcome to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast, brought to you by The Phoenix. This is a space where people impacted by substance use can come to share their story of strength and resilience, get open and honest, and inspire hope and build community through shared experience.
We'll be talking to people in our community on their own recovery journey and shine a light on the topic of recovery in all its forms. Maybe you'll hear some of your story in theirs.
Let's show the world that together we rise, recover, and live.
Welcome, everybody, to yet another episode of the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. We are your hosts, Bryce III.
And Liz McKean.
How's your energy, Liz?
My energy is awesome. It's my favorite part of the day is these convos. How's your energy, Bryce?
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Chilling. It was 80 degrees this past weekend, and today it was snowing, so my moods are just like the weather. I could be up and down a little bit, but such is life.
Oh, yeah. I was in Denver last week and it was warmer in Denver than it was here in Tampa while I was there. And then when I got to the airport, it got cold. And while I was waiting for the plane, it started snowing. So I was like, that's my cue. Like, I'm out of here. Back to the sunshine. So I'm a big wuss about the cold.
Too much variety for me.
Oof.
It's like, no, I love chaos.
I just like sunshine and comfort.
But who do we have with us today?
We have a cool conversation coming up that we've been looking forward to very much. So today we have Sarah Levy, who is the author of Drinking Games, a memoir in essays from St. Martin's Press. Her writing explores sobriety, relationships, culture, and identity. It has appeared in the New York Times, The Cut, Vogue, Glamour, Time, Elle, Refinery 29, my gosh, and Cosmopolitan, among other publications. I know, holy smokes. Sarah lives in Los Angeles by way of New York City. We're going to hear all about her story and about her journey to sharing it. So welcome, Sarah. How are you?
Welcome, Sarah.
Good. It's nice to meet you both, and I'm really excited to be here.
Nice. How's your energy?
Glad you're here.
It's good. I'm in LA, so it's noon here. Making my way through my Monday. Feeling good.
How do you feel about Mondays?
I used to hate them. I really had Sunday scaries, especially when I was drinking. And I feel like I like my life today, so I don't hate them. I don't hate Mondays anymore.
Yeah, somebody earlier to me had said something like, "Oh, it's Monday," and I'm like, "How you doing?" And like, "Oh, it's Monday," and I feel like I've designed a life where Monday doesn't hold the same connotation as it used to.
Yeah.
And when I'm reminded of that, usually when somebody says, it's Monday, it's like, oh, that's, just a little, like an Easter egg for like the privileges that I'm able to experience in recovery. And so that's kind of why I asked, because I just wanted to see how your energy is around Mondays, because not everybody enjoys them.
Yeah. No, I feel like I get to wake up and I feel like I'm getting like a second chance at my life, Like I get to wake up, I get to walk my dog, I get to have my coffee and like have a cool conversation like this one. So I feel grateful.
That's cool. I feel like we have to do that sometimes on purpose. It's so easy to get in the habit and then also just be influenced by kind of the cultural vibe of like, oh, Monday, you scroll through Instagram and you got everything. It's like we're all a bunch of Garfields, with the eat lasagna and be mad about Monday,
You getting started early.
I know.
Getting started early in the episode, Liz.
I know. Sorry. We'll see if Go-Go Gadget comes up later. But anyways, it's just finding those new habits and those new patterns of like remembering the gratitude and not just falling into that, that rut of just being frustrated by Monday, but also giving yourself grace. Because I know for me, like there's times I've chronic anxiety. And there's times that I'll find that anxiety just realizes it's Sunday before my brain's able to catch up. So I'm using those tools to allow that to just be, to settle down in its own time.
Yeah.
Let's get straight into it.
Let's do it.
Tell us a bit about yourself, about your story, how you came to the place of writing stories for other people to read. Yeah, wherever you would like to start.
So I'm from New York originally, moved to the city after I graduated from college. I always describe my drinking as kind of like started out as fun. It was fun in high school, pretty fun in college. And then it was fun with some problems. And then it was like just problems. Started experiencing consequences to the way that I was drinking. My hangovers were really bad. I woke up in the hospital several times. And I most significantly was a blackout drinker. I blacked out most times that I drank and, would just wake up in situations and places that were, unfamiliar with people who I didn't know and just like chunks of my memory missing. I drank like that until I was 28 and I got sober a few days after my 28th birthday. Didn't know anything about recovery, didn't know anything about sobriety, didn't have any friends, people my age who didn't drink. I was really terrified about what my life was going to look like. I really defined myself as being this, fun party girl, went out drinking all the time, good day, bad day, whatever, celebrating. I was the first person like ordering shots for everybody. I knew it had stopped working, but I was, really, it was a last resort for me to go sober altogether. And, to admit that I really needed help. Like I had tried to do it on my own at different points, like at 23, at 25, 26, like I would tell myself, okay, I'm not going to drink. And I would maybe go a couple of weeks. Once I went like 30 days and it never worked. I always ended up drinking again and just picking up where I had left off. So this time around, like admitting that I needed help, that I needed to like enter recovery and have a support system was very scary because, a big part of my drinking also and kind of like the denial was everything looked pretty good on the outside. I had a job, I had an apartment, I was dating, I had friends. That was sort of how I told myself, like, I can't have a real problem with alcohol because, I'm like functioning. And so admitting that I really had a problem was really scary. Yeah, I never intended to write about getting sober. I was really ashamed. I kept it a secret from my family, my friends for like the better part of a year. Eventually kind of like started thinking a lot about, the experiences that I had been having in early sobriety, like going on a date without alcohol, feeling like I was 15 again and just like re-entering the world kind of with this new perspective. And I always loved to write and it just felt like, this is my experience. Maybe someone else would be able to relate to this. Started freelance writing for different publications and eventually got the idea for this book, which just came out a few months ago called Drinking Games. And it's a memoir and essays. It's a collection of essays about my experiences drinking, with blackouts, and then in recovery. And I specifically like break it down into different topics, different areas in my life and how that was impacted by my drinking and then my sobriety. So my relationships, my friendships, my career, my mental health, wellness, social media. Yeah, that's a little bit about me. And I've been in recovery now for almost 6 years.
Amazing.
Nice. So you say you always like to write, but that jump from writing to like releasing it and like giving it to the world, like what even motivated you to start writing for different publications, like seeking a freelance write?
I had always wanted to be a writer. So I studied English and creative writing in college, loved to read books, loved to read different magazines, different, publications. And just really when I was drinking, like didn't do much of anything. I would talk a lot about the book that I wanted to write or these ideas that I had, but like I was just the drunk girl at the bar talking about like my book and had written maybe like a paragraph. It was sort of just this natural progression in sobriety to thinking more about like who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And I was working in marketing at the time and just sort of thinking like, what else is there? Now that I'm sober, like, I feel like I can kind of do anything. Like, what do I want to do? And there was just this clear voice in my head that was like, I want to write. And they always say, like in writing classes, write what tell the story that no one else can tell. And so at the time, that was my first freelance piece that I published was sober dating made me feel like a teenager again. And it was like down to feeling like I was uncomfortable in my skin, didn't know how to flirt, didn't know how to like make the first move, and I just had this gut feeling that it would be okay if I put it out into the world. I felt a little afraid. I felt a little nervous of like what the response would be, but I just felt like I have to go for it. And I reached out to an editor. I found her email address on Google and sent her the idea for the story. And she responded like 2 days later, which doesn't always happen and has not happened to me every time since. But it felt like a sign from the universe of like, keep going. And this is, what you're supposed to be doing.
Receiving that feedback and then like being able to cultivate wisdom from the feedback that we receive versus yesterday is almost detached from the day because, I blacked out or I didn't learn anything yesterday. And that's a big part of the process. And it also takes a bit of courage to like put yourself out there and not knowing that things are going to work and to listen to that intuitive voice in your heart that told you to write what you wrote about.
Yeah. What has the feedback been from readers?
I was one of these readers. Like when I was drinking, I would Google like how to get sober or, sober dating. And I would read whatever, articles came up. And so the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. And I've also just been met with a lot of identification from other young readers. I've gotten feedback from people of all ages, but specifically like young women kind of in their 20s and 30s who are just like in the same place that I was in, maybe feeling trapped in kind of a cycle of drinking, blackouts, hangovers, feeling like there's I think a stereotypical idea and image of what it looks like to have a problem with drugs or alcohol and, need to get sober. And I think a lot of the messages I get are from young people who are like, I haven't lost everything, but I'm scared. Like I'm struggling. I feel like I drink differently than other people. And like, I'm able to see myself in you and identify with the stories that you're sharing. So that's kind of been why I've kept going and kept doing it because it's so powerful, as you guys know, from doing what you do, to receive that feedback and to feel like, I went through what I went through so I could share my experience with other people and show what it's like on the other side too.
So being that trailblazer of sorts, like being that young woman that people are looking to and gaining a reference point from, did you have anybody that you looked to, or was there a stigma that you experienced when you were seeking something different other than what you had, even though you knew that like you were young and maybe this is not what, this thing that you were approaching the door of, you're not the typical what it looks like, right?
Yeah. So I definitely couldn't have gotten or stayed sober alone. And I did have other women who I looked to. I found them in recovery meetings. I found them in rooms of other sober people. I got very lucky. I walked into a women's recovery meeting, my first meeting that I went to. And I saw a room full of other women, my age, a little bit older, and they just like made sobriety look good, which like was what I needed when I was new. Like they looked shiny. They looked well rested. I felt like a mess, and they were talking about like their careers and their friendships, and they were, married. Some of them had kids. I was like, what? Like, I thought that getting sober meant my life was over. And these people were out there like living and having really big, full lives. Those women really carried me and like continue to do so, right? When I'm faced with something that I haven't gone through in sobriety before. In the very beginning, that was like, I remember I had a wedding that I was invited to and I had like 30 days sober. And I was like, how am I going to get through this wedding and not drink? Like that seemed impossible to me. And there were other women there who were like, yeah, I felt the same way. And this is what I did. I drank Diet Coke. I wasn't the last person to leave. You can leave when you're tired. They gave me like tips. And that, just being able to see people who had what I wanted, not just on the outside, but who were like, they seemed peaceful, they seemed confident, they seemed really happy with who they were. I wanted that really badly. And that kept me, like coming around and staying sober.
That journey really speaks to me. Like it wasn't, I was a little older than you and I finally got it figured out. I remember, I think it was right around age 27 when I remember for the first time Googling 12-step meetings, getting to the point, like I had known for quite a while longer than that, maybe that was coming, but that's the first time I remember actually being like, this might be something I got to take care of, but still wasn't at the point that I could say anything out loud to anybody I knew. And I know that was the beginning. And then, reading all those books about people who had like walked that path, listening to podcasts, looking up all the blogs, all those things before I was able to say it out loud. And then once I was able to say it out loud, it was only to other people who were having that experience, whether that was in like a recovery meeting or on an app or some space where it was just like kind of strangers who had walked this path. And it wasn't till quite a while after that, when I felt more and more solid in that I was able to be out loud sober to people that, knew me. Because I think a lot of us, even if we're totally, burning our lives down in other places, can still have this outward appearance of having it together in some areas. And that was the scariest part for me about being out loud sober. I mean, there's even times on this podcast that I'll say something or reference a time of my life, and I'm just picturing the person who is hearing that, possibly who knew me then, is like all of a sudden kind of like rewriting that history of our relationship because they didn't know that was where I was at. And I think that's probably the thing that takes the most courage of all, is to have that be something that people that were there then and didn't know. So I'm wondering if that was an experience you had, how that's felt, and if you've had any feedback from like people in your life who maybe were like, what?
Yeah. I mean, definitely when Drinking Games came out and a lot of my friends read it for the first time, that we had a lot of conversations, I think that people were shocked. Like I said, on the outside, it looked normal. I was wearing the little mini skirts and heels and going out with everyone and posting pictures on Instagram and like making it look like I was fine. I think also there's just a lack of education and awareness about what alcohol use disorder, substance abuse, alcoholism, whatever label you want to put on it, what it looks like. I think for a lot of my friends, they knew that I would get really drunk. They knew that I would black out and that I would be really hungover the next day. But I don't think any of them knew what it meant, and that I could have a problem, right? We had a lot of conversations about like, I had one friend who was like, I feel really bad. I feel like I should have helped. I didn't know that you were struggling. I didn't know all that you were going through. And I had another friend who was like, I'm just glad that you're doing better now, because I knew and I didn't know what to do or how to help. And I think in terms of like recording podcasts, I have thought about that too. With like, is someone going to listen and think about, recontextualize like our relationship? I found that like most people really don't listen. Like I will sometimes wonder, like, did this person hear this podcast and like they don't say anything? And I'm like, they didn't listen. And that's okay, because like everyone's kind of thinking about themselves and living their own lives. And that's very liberating, because I used to worry so much about what people thought of me. And like, now I'm just kind of like, I just look ahead and, if people have feelings about it, like I'm happy to talk about it and have an open dialogue. But I think that fear of being judged or what people would say about me, like it was coming from within. Like I was my harshest inner critic, and like I was projecting what I thought they were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that talk be in the head, in our minds. And then when we disclose and see the effect of it, the ripple effect, what I've learned is that the more naked we're able to get, the more we're able to impact how people perceive recovery or active substance use disorder, alcoholism, to look like. And so, your friends that read the book and it's like, yo, I didn't even know you were going through that. I had similar circumstances with my mom where I would tell her something. She was like, oh, I didn't know it was that bad. And it was like, yeah, it was. And I felt like in that moment, like I thought you knew then, So when I told her this time, like I just said it nonchalantly in recovery. And she's like, whoa, like, hold on, wait a minute. Like, it was like that. And it's like, yeah, it was like that. But what we do is we're putting the tools on the floor to allow for people to understand how it is that they can advocate for what this is, and for people to have their antenna up for people who may need help in ways that they didn't know that they needed help because they didn't know that it looked like that. So I think it takes bravery, it takes honesty, it takes courage to be able to show up in these ways for you, and in turn we plant the seeds to show up for somebody else. And then I just like salute you because you've taken it to the next level in publishing not only a book but like a memoir, where it's like these are your personal experiences. And, anybody who's ever created anything and released it to the public knows that once you let it go, like it no longer belongs to you. Like now it's for everybody to consume, and their perceptions get involved, and all those things happen that may not have been our initial intention. But that's like a commendable thing that you were able to put that book out.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. And I think I really relate to that sentiment of like, once you put it out in the world, it doesn't belong to you anymore. I was talking to someone about this recently, about like sharing publicly about being in recovery, and then also having your own kind of private relationship with recovery and what you keep separate. And, I bared it all in the book, and it is very honest. And a lot of what's in the book, like I had made my peace with when I wrote about it. Like I made amends to people. Like some of those things happened 10, 15 years ago. It was not raw when I wrote about it. And I think that allowed me to separate and continue to feel a degree of separation from it. And there are things now that like, I don't talk about publicly in real time. Like I keep them for myself. I share them in a recovery meeting. Right. And I think having that distinction, like that boundary for my own recovery and my own sort of like mental well-being is pretty key when it comes to sharing about my experiences publicly.
Yeah, let me ask you this, because I know there are a lot of writers that listen to this podcast too, and writing can be a craft that can be cathartic for the processing of those emotions. And so how do you balance using the craft for your own healing and personal understanding and creating for others to consume?
There's a lot that I write that I don't share in real time. So like if I'm going through something, journaling is like my number one tool. Like I will pick up a pen and paper and write about it. And there's that catharsis in it. And oftentimes like I'll just let it sit for a little while after I've written it. If I feel heat about something and I'm still feeling like it's not totally resolved, I often won't publish it, or there's a bit of a in between time with a book, right? So things that went in the book I wrote a year, 2 years before the book was published, and had built in time to sort of go back to it, rewrite, have feedback, and feel like, okay, there is some closure now when I look back and read it versus the first raw draft. And so I think it's just, again, like distinguishing between writing as a tool that I do use in my recovery and, like a cathartic act, and then what the final product ends up being that someone would ultimately read.
I love that. I feel like that's such an important thing to talk about because, we're in this age of social media and people, just sharing so much of themselves. And, I think as a society and certainly in the recovery community, we see in real time the benefits of that, and someone is brave enough to say this hard thing happened to me and be really raw about it. It gives other people kind of this permission that they didn't even know they needed to raise their hand and say the same, and perhaps get some help. We've said this before in this podcast, like there's an obligation to do that. Like your recovery is your recovery, and like your experience and your life and your feelings and your pain, like you get to decide like what is right for you to share and what is right for you to keep and what is right for you to maybe share in a space that it's not going to go beyond that. And, even though it is often helpful for people to hear each other's story. Like if you are out there recovering very quietly and nobody knows about it but you and maybe like your most important person, that's still very real, and you're still very much, part of this work. And And it's a big deal. Doesn't take anything away from it just because you're not doing it out loud. And then, the alternative too, if you're doing it entirely out loud, it's still just as much yours. So yeah, so thank you for saying that and acknowledging that like there's pieces of it that are just for you. I think that's really powerful and takes a lot of self knowing to be able to sort through that.
Yeah. And I think it's like that pause too that we work on in sobriety, right? It's like I was so reactive when I was drinking and like just would like lash out at people or cut ties, burn bridges, like so black and white. And I think like that I've heard like you gain like a second of pause for every year that you stay sober or whatever. And so it's like being able to pause and say like, I don't need to share this in real time. Like I can continue kind of working on it and like go back to it, edit it, rewrite it, not ever share it. That's okay. And that's something that I think just takes time.
It takes time to cultivate wisdom. I wrote, I don't know where I wrote it, but I always write it because it's like there's always this point where it just comes out and it's like you can't force wisdom. And it's like, and that intuitive nature comes from building a relationship with our craft, building a relationship with interpersonal relationships, so we know how to show up in the relationships that we hold. Like building a relationship with ourselves. That's a lot of relationships. But like having that patience, but also the continuity and showing up on a daily basis, and the importance of the day in feeding into tomorrow. Like I think is just some of the gems that have been allotted for me in my recovery, where it's like, maybe I'll sit with this piece for a little bit. Maybe I won't let this piece go. Or maybe it's time to let this go. And then the quieting of that voice that says, somebody tell me what to do with this piece. Because that voice becomes like mine now. And I can depend on me to guide me. And I can depend on that intuition, and it's built off of that experience. And then, like you said, like when you got that the article submitted for freelancing, and like that was an indication, like, oh, maybe there's something here. So now every move that you make beyond that, it's like, well, I submitted that, and they accepted that quick. So I know I have something. I know I'm contributing something. I know somebody is benefiting from it. So now moving forward, I have that as my experience that helps me inform my decisions moving forward. And that's something that can only be cultivated with intention and time, and that's a seed that I just want to plant for people like me, when I listen back to this episode, who may need to hear it, that there may be something right now that you don't necessarily understand. And it's going to take just showing up for it and allowing for it to kind of stew there and allowing for this experience to be had, and learn to have faith and compassion for yourself as you have faith, but faith in the inherent notion that you'll figure it out.
Yeah. And like, I love all that you just said. And, I think it's like those slogans that we hear, like trust the process, or like keep coming back one day at a time, right? Like they're cliches because they're true. And for me, like in early recovery, I didn't know how anything was going to turn out. Like, I never would have predicted that I would be like sitting here having this conversation with you, having written a memoir that just came out, living in California, married. Like I just wanted to not drink and wake up hating myself. Like that's it. I thought my life would stay exactly the same. And people would say to me like, take it one day at a time. And like, you don't know what you don't know. And it was just like, I kind of surrendered slowly to this belief that there was just more to be revealed. I think like wisdom takes time, right? What you said, that cultivating wisdom takes time. It's true. Recovery takes time. And now I'm really grateful for that, because I still feel like I'm new and I'm still learning new things. And that humility is when I feel like lost or I don't know what my next move is, like it can be so comforting to remember, like, I don't have to know, I couldn't have predicted it back then, and it has worked out so far. So like, I don't have to try to control everything now.
So true.
I was very adamant about the fact that like, I was not writing a self-help book. Like this is not a prescriptive how to get sober guide. Like, I don't know the answer to that. It's different for everyone. This book is my experience. These are my stories, and this is my perspective on the culture that I came up in, and like the work hard, play hard atmosphere that I was a part of in New York, and how it impacted me. And then like what happened when I got sober. It's just my story. Yeah, because like I don't know more than anybody else.
Yeah, but I'd jump off a cliff and say I wouldn't jump off a cliff, but
Please don't jump off a cliff.
no cliff jumping. But I would dare to say that that's more important than the prescriptive, because usually there's something within the prescriptive that is a personality, right? And so when in program, they say principles, not personalities, and that's one thing that I've held on to in different realms of recovery, where it's like, okay, how can I see beyond the person that's saying these things and like get to the meat? Like, how can I eat the meat and spit out the bones? And there's ways that your story, as a young person, as somebody, in New York, as somebody who's had the experience that you've had, are going to speak to things that are partially my truth too. And there's no way that you can know that, and there's no way that you can prescribe that. But the best way that you can be an exemplification of it is by being who you are now and telling your story like transparent, with all transparency about where it is that you've been. And what that does for me is it gives me a reference point. And so now I'm not alone. And now we've created community. And now, like, I can keep going, and maybe there's more people like you, and I don't feel so alone. And maybe I'm not the only one that's dealt with these things. So I would venture to say, not jump off a cliff, but venture to say that is more important than prescribing, like, this is the way, and that's what I resonate with.
Me too.
Yeah. For me, like 12-step was not my pathway. So I'm always really attracted to anyone's, story and messaging when they are accepting of all pathways. And, Phoenix is accepting of all pathways. And I think so often, we're seeing, stories like yours come out where the ones that I definitely like relate to and read over and over again are the ones where somebody, that's all they're doing is just saying, this is my truth. This is my story. This is what happened to me. And, it doesn't have to be that I want everything that you have now. I want your whole, I want my life to look just like yours, but I do want to live a life where I have choices, where I have hope, where like, I know that I know that I don't know what is coming next, but, that I know it's not, because I have taken this step towards recovery, and that's really beautiful and really powerful. And I think for so many young people in recovery, I know for me, when I was Googling those 12-step meetings when I was 27 years old, one of the problems that I ran into is that I was like, I don't want what I'm seeing, like some of what I'm picturing recovery to be is something that I'm like, okay, I know what I'm doing right now isn't working, but also like, I don't see anything else that's better. And then for you living your best life, that's a beautiful thing to see. So kind of in that energy, I'm wondering what brings you the most joy right now? Like what part of recovery and what part of your life right now do you wake up in the morning feeling the most excited about?
It's very similar to the part that I felt most excited about in that first year. It's really like the community that I have found and the connections that I've formed. I now more than ever, know that I can't do this on my own. And as my life has gotten bigger, as in recovery, which is like a gift of staying sober, I have needed to lean on other sober people, women in particular. And the stuff that gets me the most excited is like spending time one-on-one with another sober woman. I just hung out with a sober friend on Friday, and we just met up and had lunch and had a really honest conversation about what was going on for both of us. And it's just so nourishing, in a way that I don't get that with everyone in my life. I have close friends who, I've known for over a decade, and I love spending time with them and catching up with them. But there is a different energy that's exchanged when you're just meeting someone exactly where they are in their recovery, and you're able to laugh about kind of the horror stories and what it was like, and also talk about what it's like now and kind of how we're navigating all the, that stuff one day at a time. And so, yeah, I feel like community is something that brings me a lot of joy. I also just think what we were just talking about, not knowing what's going to happen, that used to really terrify me. And now it brings me a lot of joy, where I'm I've been working on this book for a couple of years, promoting it for the last few months. It's been out for 4 months now. I don't know what's going to happen next, right? And so that could terrify me, but I also find it really exciting because it's like, I can't predict it. I don't know. I couldn't have predicted that I would be here. So I think just this idea that like, as long as I don't pick up a drink, incredible things could keep happening. That's been proven to me time and time again. And when I see other sober people, like other reference points, that also is proven to me that like they've been able to not only achieve incredible things, but just continue to feel at ease, right? To be at peace with themselves. You know, it's pretty simple. Like if I pick up a drink, things immediately get worse. There's chaos, right? If I stay sober, I don't know what amazing direction or unexpected event could come to pass for me. And so I think it's just that kind of like exciting unknown that brings me joy.
So there's a couple of questions I want to ask you before we get out of here.
Yeah.
The first being, you speak about the importance of community. And, you know, this is the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. So we're going to scream the Phoenix from the mountaintop as being a community that you could access. What was your process in finding that community? And what suggestions would you give to somebody right now who may be listening? It's like, I don't have community. I don't know where people are that are doing the things that you Sarah, are doing. Like, I don't know where these people are. Like, what would you tell them?
I got sober through 12-step meetings, and I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have gotten sober without a 12-step program. I will say that if you had told me that almost 6 years ago, I would have laughed in your face. I thought that like 12-step groups were culty and weird, and I didn't believe in the God thing. Like it all just seemed really not for me. I didn't think I belonged. You know, I just was desperate enough to give it a shot this time around. And I'm really grateful for that desperation, because what I have found is that like there are meetings for everyone. And for me, you know, women's meetings have been a really safe space. That's just like where I have found my people. And I think of it kind of like dating, you know, like going and trying different groups until you find where, you know, they say go where it's warm, like until you feel like, okay, these are my people. I relate to these stories. Now, like post-pandemic, you can log on to Zoom meetings all over the world, you know? So if you can't find them in your small town or your city, you could log on and find connection. And again, you know, that's not to say that it's the only way to get sober. It's not to say it's for everyone. It's what's worked for me. And that's where I have found, you know, community and connection. And you know, it's these programs are anonymous. So for a while, you know, I didn't mention them and I don't always talk about them, but like in the context of this question, and when someone asks me, how did you do it? And how can I find community? I will always shout out 12-step recovery and 12-step programs, because that's what I believe saved my life.
You say, go where it's warm. I like that. And once again, it makes me, like in hindsight, makes me, I don't use the word luck because I don't necessarily believe in luck, but just how the stars were the day I got out of rehab and found that meeting that I went to. Because that's what was, how you were describing the people that you have found when you found the people that you found, where it was like, there was peace there. There was, wasn't nobody trying to push nothing on me, but they were just happy and they had what it is that I wanted in that moment of desperation. And so that's what I attach to. And I find some of the same energy at the Phoenix. I find some of the same energy at Recovery Dharma. I find some of the same energy at, like, I've been able to bounce between different communities and find those things. And I can understand if somebody, you know, went to a meeting and was like, yo, like this, because I've been to some meetings where it was like, I'm glad this was my first meeting, because I'd be like, this ain't the way, you know?
Me too. Yeah.
But yeah, to go and find where it's warm, like go where it's warm, like find your people. They're out there, and you may could go to a place that's not a representation of what aligns with what it is that you're seeking. But, you know, don't be so quick to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, that's so true. And, you know, I think that comes with a level of kind of trusting yourself that we don't often have when we're in that moment of desperation. Like, I know, for me, you know, having tried several different types of meetings, types of communities, and struggling to find the right one, and then kind of like, throwing the baby out with the bathwater a bunch of times, and just, going back to what I knew wasn't working, but just digging that hole a little bit deeper. There was the moment that I found that I came across the Phoenix, and it felt warm. Like, that's such a good way to describe it, and I remember just seeing the pictures for the first time and seeing the, somebody's Instagram stories and being like, why am I wanting to go to CrossFit? Like, that is like, I can barely get myself off the couch, but for some reason that just feels like the thing that I should do. And like, I had gotten so used to not trusting anything that came from inside this head, but I trusted it enough to go, and it was the thing. And so like, it's like sorting through the what is you and what is real and what is not. But throughout that, I'll just continue to show up somewhere, because now we're lucky. We're so fortunate to live in this time where there are so many options and there are so many communities that, I mean, I know this is a cliche because it's true, is like, just keep coming back. And that doesn't mean you have to go to the same exact room. If that's not working, go to another room, go to another community, another pathway, but like, keep trying, because there are as many different ways to do this in communities as there are people. And there is just, I don't know a single one of those communities that doesn't have just so many people with their arms outstretched. Like, we're here, jump off that cliff, we'll catch you, like, we're here with you, and it's worth it. So I think it's beautiful to know that there is that warmth. And if you're out there listening and not sure where the heck that is for you, like, it is out there. Like, keep trying.
Also, full transparency. Please, nobody jump off a cliff. Please,
nobody jump off. We are not.
No cliff jump.
So let it be known at the Rise, Recover, Live podcast, we do not condone jumping off a cliff.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned CrossFit, right? Because it's like, it can be any community. It doesn't have to be 12-step. It doesn't have to be a meeting. It doesn't. For me, it was just like anywhere where I'm not at the bar. Anywhere where I'm not drinking or alone on my couch, hungover, feeling sorry for myself. It's like just being around people where I can share honestly. That is it for me. And so whatever that looks like, it can be different for everyone, but I just think that's such an integral part. And for me too, it was like, I was in therapy for years before I got sober. Therapy alone wasn't enough for me. I needed to be.
We get real good at lying to therapists. I don't know about you, but sorry to all the therapists out there.
Now I'm in therapy, and it's actually really helpful because I'm doing the work elsewhere as well, right? And I'm showing up and I'm honest, but I needed a community of people who I could also like bounce things off of and hear their stories and identify. Like, that was just so powerful for me.
Yeah. So true.
All right. And then, so for my second question, it's the second and final question. If you could go back in time to any version of yourself previously and tell that version of Sarah something, what would that something be?
It makes me emotional. Like, just listening to you ask that, I get a little teary-eyed. The first thing that comes to mind is when I graduated from college, I went through a really bad breakup, and that really kicked off a different level of my drinking because I was so hurt, and I thought I was going to be with this person for the rest of my life. We were very young, very in love, and I was broken, and I drank and, did a lot of things to numb that pain. And I think if I could go back, I would go back to her and I would tell her, you are going to be okay. It is going to be okay. And you do not have to drink over this. Like, it's not going to fix it, and it's going to take time. I just wanted to fast forward through the discomfort. I hate being uncomfortable. I just want to feel good all the time.
Amen.
And so I just kept drinking and drinking over it, thinking it would make it go away. And I think I would just tell her, like, it sucks, but like, you have to sit in it and feel it, and you're going to get through it. You're going to be okay. But I kept, I struggled. I was in pain for probably 2 years, maybe even longer after that, because I just kept running from it. I didn't let myself feel any of it for a long time.
Fast forward through the discomfort.
So good. It's so true. It's like we, in an attempt to skip the pain, we're pickling the pain. We're keeping it. We're preserving it. Yes. And I think to know that it isn't forever is the thing that allows you to sit through it. That allows you to actually to survive it, knowing that you will, that you can. Mm-hmm. So thank you. Go ahead, Bryce. Go ahead.
Excuse me, sir. Do you have a pickled pain sandwich that I can get up off you?
I was waiting for it. I could see your face the moment it comes out. Let's
No,
go
but
on
that was deep. That was deep, Liz. Liz be having the bars. That's what you don't know, Sarah. Liz be having the bars, whether it's Garfield, Inspector Gadget. Man, she be having the bars. Last time she was shining turds. Man, the quotables from this podcast all come from Liz. I promise
and
you.
I don't even know why that happens.
But no, we got some definite quotables from Sarah though today. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story and making us aware of your memoir so we can grab that.
Oh, yeah. Oh man, I couldn't get enough. My bookshelf right now is just like nothing but. So yours is definitely going to join that library of Quitlit. That's what I've heard it called that I love so much. So speaking of, where can folks find you, find your book? We'll have everything linked in the show notes, but definitely tell them where to get started.
Yeah. Best place you can find me is on Instagram. I'm at Sarah with an H, L Levy. My website's the same, sarahlevy.com. And you can find my book, Drinking Games, online and wherever books are sold.
Awesome. What a great name for a book. That's super cool.
Thank you.
So clever. Awesome.
Somebody might try to search that book up and be looking for something else and find what they really need.
When you look for it on Amazon, you have to put in like Drinking Games, Sarah Levy, because there's a lot of like beer pong sets and like
that's what I was thinking.
That's awesome. Well, and then like you said, Bryce, somebody's going to come across it who didn't intend to, but it's exactly what they needed to. Mm-hmm. So just the way that things get into people's hands, and I think it's all on purpose. So, well, thank you, Sarah. It's been so fun to talk to you and get to know you. Appreciate you sharing your story. So just thank you for being a voice in the world that's helping people to feel less alone.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. And thank you, everyone, for listening, for joining us yet again. Please be sure to send this episode to somebody who you think would benefit from it, who maybe might feel less alone from hearing that you're not alone. It helps us so much if you hit that subscribe button. That allows you to not miss a single episode, allows us to make sure that all of our episodes are getting to you. And if you would be so kind as to leave us a review or even just hit that 5-star rating on whatever podcast app you might be listening to us on, it makes an enormous difference, and we are enormously grateful. So we'd love that. And then also let us know how you're doing. How can they reach us, Bryce?
Well, it's easy and simple how you reach out to us. You go to your nearest Petco, you go to the carrier pigeon aisle, and then you get a thing of Post-it notes. You write a letter and you put it on the leg of the carrier pigeon and you send it to my address. No, what you do is you download the Phoenix app off of the App Store if you're on Apple, or off of the Google Play Store if you have an Android. And when you download this app, you're already tapping into a community of free programming of a whole bunch of cool individuals, and different groups are in that podcast, or different groups are in that app. And so when you go in the app, you go in a podcast group in the app, and that's where we'll be. You come in there, you tell us what you think about this episode, tell us what you like about the show, what you want to hear more of, what you want to hear less of, and we'll be there all ears. Download the app on the App Store. See, I threw myself off with the carrier pigeon thing. I was trying to be cool and be.
You really drew a picture.
I usually don't stumble as much, but just go to the App Store, get the app, and then come on a podcast group on the app and come holler at us.
That's right. Yep. Or just send your carrier pigeon our way. Either way, we'll be so glad to hear from you. Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Bryce, and thank you, everyone listening, and we will see you next time.
Catch you later.
So now you're excited. Bryce, Liz, how do I get involved with the Phoenix? Well, my friend, it is super simple. We actually have an app. Head over to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, or look in the show notes of this podcast, wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, and go download the Phoenix app.
The Phoenix app makes it so easy to find classes that are near you, or to access our virtual class schedule where you can hop on from the comfort of your home. You can also join our groups and have a conversation with someone from the Phoenix community from anywhere in the world. Please make sure that you join the podcast group where you can connect with Bryce and I and other listeners. Everything that you need is in the show notes. You can also head to our website at www.thephoenix.org. And maybe while you're there, you click the volunteer tab and get even more involved.